Thank you for joining us today. I'm Amy Donahue, the Vice President of Marketing at HHM CPAs, and we are here to talk about a concept called required minimum distribution, some of the recent changes that have happened with RMDs, and how, again, there's some things on the horizon that might impact your taxes and wealth planning. And so to help me talk about that concept and explain a little bit more, I have Andrew Cook. He is one of our advisors at HHM Wealth to really talk through this concept and help us understand a little bit more. So thanks for joining me today, Andrew.
It's great to be here.
Perfect. Okay, so first big concept, what is a required minimum distribution, or RMD?
So during our working years, we have the ability to defer our earned income into retirement accounts. And if we do that on a pre-tax account, we actually can defer that income taxation to later. In addition, that account can grow tax deferred. Unfortunately, the IRS eventually wants to start collecting tax revenue. And so historically, they've set that age at 7.5 when you have to start taking out required minimum distributions each year.
Okay, so recent legislation that was the SECURE Act has changed some of the parameters around required minimum distributions. So can you explain what's different now?
Yeah, so the SECURE Act was passed at the end of 2019, and for the new age for required distributions is 72. And so if you were not 70 and a half by January 1st, 2020, you fall under the new rules. You don't have to start taking your RMD, your first RMD, until age 72.
Okay, but are there any exceptions with that rule?
Yes, it's not a new provision, but the very first year you can delay your RMD to the following April 1st. Now, what that means is the following year you'll end up having to take 2 RMDs. Now, if you're going to be in a significantly lower tax bracket, that may be advantageous to do it that way. Okay,
but subsequent years after that, when do you have to take that RMD?
Each year you have from January 1st till December 31st to take your RMD. It's very important that you don't miss that. The IRS has a 50% excise tax penalty on any amount of RMD that's not taken. So it's very important to stay on top of that.
Yeah, make sure plan for that in that year. So how is an RMD calculated?
So the first thing we look at is the prior year-end balance, and then we divide that by the applicable IRS life expectancy table. The good news is that most record keepers and custodians will track and calculate that for you.
Good, yeah. So not necessarily something we have to keep up on an individual level. But does it change year to year based on your age?
Yeah, so the denominator will decrease by 1 each year as you age. And so what that means is when you start off in your 70s, it's closer to 3.5% that you need to take out from your account. As you move into your 90s, the RMD turns out to be more like 8%. And so you can see the percentage increasing as the denominator decreases.
Okay. So I would also assume that the RMD can change based on how an IRA was invested. So can you explain that?
Yeah, so the other part of the equation, or the first part of the equation, is your account balance at the end of the year. So especially in the early years when the percentage of RMD is lower, if your investment experience is better than that, you actually can see your account value go up during the year. And so, of course, if your account value is going up, you can see a larger dollar amount RMD the following year.
Okay. So in 2020, CARES Act allowed for 2020 RMDs to be waived. So how does that have an impact now, and does that impact the RMD you have to take in 2021?
The market was negatively impacted in the spring of 2020 with the global pandemic, and the government waived 2020 RMDs, as you mentioned. What that has done is combined is if you didn't have to take an RMD in 2020 and then combined with the significant market recovery, a lot of retirees are seeing much higher account balances at the end of the year due to those two factors. And so they're also seeing much higher dollar amount RMDs for 2021.
Okay. So another impact was the Secure Act doing away with a concept called a stretch IRA. So for those who do not know, including myself, what's meant by a stretch IRA, and how does that impact RMD?
So previously, non-spousal beneficiaries had the ability to elect an inherited stretch IRA, which essentially allowed them to defer the taxation over their lifetime, and they would take RMDs. Under the current law, they now only have 10 years to distribute a non-spousal beneficiary only has 10 years to distribute an inherited IRA. And so you need to put a little thought into how you're going to do that. If you took all the money the first year, the way the tax brackets are set up, you could end up having to pay a lot more tax than if you took a little bit each year. So it's just something to think about and be aware of under the new law.
Okay, so another concept that's related again to stretch IRA and RMDs is a concept called qualified charitable distributions, or QCDs. So how does a QCD impact your required minimum distribution if you've inherited an IRA as a non-spousal beneficiary?
Yeah. Well, let me first just start by explaining the QCD, and it's essentially available to anyone that's 70.5 and is charitably inclined. And those folks can make direct payments to a charity of up to $100,000 a year. The benefit is twofold. One, it actually counts as meeting your RMD for the year. And second, it's a more efficient way to give money to charities. Charities don't generally have to pay tax on gifts. A beneficiary may or may not be old enough to meet the 70.5, so that a lot of times that's something that's done on the parent level. I think it is important to mention that under the current law, it's worthwhile reviewing your estate plan, your beneficiary designations, because pre-tax IRAs, now that we don't have the stretch, it's more efficient to gift those to charities or to heirs that are at a lower tax bracket. So.
Okay, good to know. So to finish up, is there anything else that we should know about required minimum distributions and how it can impact our taxes in the years to come?
Yeah, so there's currently legislation in both chambers of Congress for retirement, which is good as far as the eventual passage of a bill. Timing is a little less certain because there's a lot of other things on the legislative agenda at this time. But some of the common themes that we see in both bills are slowly moving the required minimum distribution starting age to 75 over the next 10 years. Also exempting IRA accounts $100,000 and less to not have to take RMDs. And then also giving pre-retirees the ability to make larger catch-up contributions to their IRA. So there's a lot of good things that we're hopeful for through those bills, but again, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, see if those things materialize that are on the horizon. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me today. Again, wanted to give you a little information about required minimum distributions and some of the changes that have happened this year and on the horizon. If you have questions about RMDs, we encourage you to reach out to your financial advisor. You're welcome to go to hhmwealth.com to learn a little bit more about Andrew's work and Wealth's work there. And again, we appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us.